Joining me, professional speaker, author, aviation industry expert, pilot. She works for Continental Airlines, from what I understand. Captain Karen Kahn. How you doing this morning, Captain?
Doing great. How are you?
All right. It's an honor. Now, you have a new book out, and you were the author of Flight Guide for Success. So is this a way for someone who wants to enter the airline industry to sort of find their way and get ahead, right?
It is, but it's actually designed for anybody who wants to get ahead at something they're passionate at. It's really a treatise on how to do for a living what you love to do anyway and have somebody help you and believe you.
How did you decide that you had the flying bug?
When I was 19, I had a friend who flew, and by the way, you can do the same thing. He took me down to the airport and said, if you want to learn how to fly, go out to the airport, take an introductory ride. And I'll tell you, in those days, it was $5.
Uh-huh.
I think now it's about $50, but times have changed, right?
Yeah, energy costs and everything else, sure.
Right. I took an introductory ride, liked it, thought to myself, gee, wouldn't it be neat to do for a living, which you love to do anyway? And I was off and running.
So for 30 years now, you've been flying.
Actually, I'm going to be 31 next week with Continental, and it took me about 9 years to get the experience, because in those days, things were a lot slower. They weren't doing as much hiring.
Now, there's a lot of, you hear the stories of crisis right now in the airline industry. Heck, here in Medford, we just had an airline pull out a few days ago, and we're hearing mergers, acquisitions, bankruptcies. Aloha goes bankrupt and such. But you're saying that there is still opportunity out there for a good pilot? Well,
I think so. There are always people who want to fly. The airlines will be around. They've projected that there are going to be quite a number of pilot vacancies as the lump in the snake, as we call it, of older pilots decide to retire and then mandatorily retire at age 65. Mm-hmm. So there's always going to be need for more pilots. It's a great business. All of aviation has got, in my mind, something for everybody to get into, and it's a fun one, and it has lots of benefits.
Now, did you come up through civilian air, or did you come up through the military?
I came up civilian because in those days the military hadn't had women on board for long enough to have them be able to go to the airlines at the point I did. So,
is that starting to change now?
Oh, very definitely. Although the military is working very hard to keep the pilots that they've got with attractive salaries and benefits and a longer enlistment term that requires you to stay longer.
So they got tired of just training pilots for free for the civilian airliners, huh?
Right. So you'll find many people make, obviously, a career in the military, and many pilots will leave and go to the airlines but stay in the military reserves, so they, shall we say, double dip.
Yeah. Okay. Now, today, I shouldn't say today, but actually in years past, there was a stereotype of what an airline pilot was supposed to be about. In fact, it was sort of parodied in Airplane. I'm sure you remember that with Peter Graves and stuff. The square-jawed superhero sort of look. What's the percentage now of women captains in the airlines, since you were in such esteemed company there?
Well, I think that we've got a percentage probably of women pilots around 3 to 4% in the whole industry, including women captains and women first officers.
Well, you're still part of a small club then.
It is small, and of course, unfortunately, anytime they start laying off pilots, as we are expecting they will do, the numbers get a little bit smaller. But I think women are recognizing it's a good profession, and if it's something you really enjoy, it's a place where there is relatively little discrimination because, for the most part, you move up according to the seniority system.
So it's pretty much that way. Have you ever felt like you have been treated poorly because of being a woman?
In 1977, when I was hired, I was happy to say that the airline I worked for was pretty much neutral in saying if she can do her job, that's what counts.
Glad to hear it.
I think I was very lucky at not encountering a lot of the problems that some other people might have had because I believed very clearly if you can't do your job, you shouldn't be here. So I've had a little bit, but a lot of it was learning to have a thick skin, have a good sense of humor, and do the job, then play second.
But, of course, the guys always had to have a thick skin, right, and a good sense of humor. So you're just kind of, playing the game like everybody else was, I guess.
Very, very definitely. And I think once they recognized that you were competent, they were there to say, hey, let's support her. She's got what it takes. If she can't do her job, she's out, but she can do her job. let's just, as I always say, the airplane does not know the sex of the person who's flying it.
Very good point of view there. If you just joined me, I'm speaking with Captain Karen Kahn, and her book, by the way, is A Flight Guide for Success, Tips and Tactics for the Aspiring Airline Pilot, and flightguideforsuccess.com. You can find out more about that on the web. With the job cuts that are going on out there in the aviation industry, you say, though, that there is going to be a pilot shortage, which is probably not getting talked about enough then. So this is a good time to start training.
I think it's an excellent time. Nobody becomes a pilot overnight, and those of us who've been in the business for a while love to see people who have a little bit of seasoning. So I think now's a good time to get into it. There are going to be opportunities. There'll always be opportunities. And I think if it's something you're passionate about, even as a middle-aged pilot, we're seeing a lot of people coming on board because the age requirements and the hiring discrimination that used to exist is virtually gone.
You think the time will come that age 65 mandatory retirement will go away? I mean, especially given how long we're starting to live now.
It's hard to say. I think at this point, age 65 was instituted so that at least pilots could bridge the gap between 60, the old age, and Social Security, 65, which made a real inequity in those days.
Okay, but even a 65-year-old pilot right now, you're checked out a lot, aren't you? Don't you have to go through a lot of medical exams, and aren't you pretty much watched like a hawk?
Continuously. So I think more than any other industry, we have, no-notice check rides, people riding in the cockpit with you, twice a year medical exams, ongoing line checks, which is somebody just walking on board one day and saying, hi, I'm here to ride with you and see how you do. So yeah. I think we're much more highly regulated than anybody else.
Well, I'm glad to hear that in one respect. I mean, I did a web search for you, Captain Kahn. I couldn't find any pictures of you downing shooters in any bar, any place.
Why, thank you.
Before
I'm
getting
so
on
glad.
the plane. I did a search. No, I'm just kidding. In all seriousness, hey, what is the feeling within you and your coworkers about what is going on in the airline business? Not necessarily for the employees right now, but how do you see it playing out for the passengers? Because I don't think I've ever seen a time in my life in which more people have been more teed off at an overall industry class than the airline industry right now. Between the security, between the pricing, wanting to charge people for how much you weigh, charging for the bags now. I mean, it seems like the consumer is being sort of attacked from all sides right now. How do you see it?
I think the consumers are finally having to pay for what it is they want to purchase. I think we do it in many other industries. We just don't recognize it. If you go to a restaurant and order a la carte, this is kind of what you're starting to get from the airlines now. They're saying, let's make people pay for what it is they want to purchase. They have gone ahead, I think, the airlines, and priced themselves so low to stay competitive that they have always felt that they can't do a fare raise unless everybody matches it. Mm-hmm. And we know restaurants, of course, you've got a wide variety all over town. Unfortunately, in this case, we're talking about transportation as a real perishable product, which means once the airplane seat leaves, you can't get it back.
Yeah, you can't sell it.
Exactly. So airlines are doing whatever they can to sell them, and now they've realized that if price is the one thing that will open people's eyes, then let's allow them to purchase only what they want so that if they get a bare-bones service, it's because that's exactly what they paid for.
I never really thought about it that way, but come to think of it, makes a good point. So if you're not going to carry a lot of luggage, hey, no problem. You get the cheap fare. If you want to take 2, 3, 4, or 5 or more, you're going to pay through the nose for it. Or you're at least going to pay for that privilege, I guess.
Yes, some airlines are also starting. I think you'll see it be more prevalent to price their seats differently, whether they're a window, an aisle, or a center. If you want the cheapest seat, it'll definitely be the center seat.
Yeah, you're going to be in the center. By the way, do you know, is it just me, or are the airline seats from the air... Now, this is like a Boeing type of question, but you fly these jets and such, so you would have an idea. Are they actually making the seats more narrow, or am I just getting wider?
Well, let's see. We haven't met, but I will tell you from having sat in them, I'm also a commuter. I fly to work every week, so as well as being the pilot who flies the plane, I'm also very often the person who's sitting in one of those seats. As a matter of fact, last week it was seat 41F.
Now, I tend to be in steerage for the most part.
Right.
I've not done first class, so let's leave.
No, 41F, I'll tell you, is the very last seat in a very long airplane, backside right at the window. Mm-hmm. The seats are pretty much standard. What they've done is lighten up the seats so that they don't weigh as much, which may mean they're a little thinner, and if you need a little more padding, you may find them a little harder to sit on. the pitch of the seat, how close the seat is placed to the seat ahead of it, is a big bone of contention in the airlines because that allows them to advertise legroom.